Can I ask you if everyone's ready on our side? Let's go. So, welcome everyone to this webinar on the outcomes of the June 2026 meetings of the three compliance committees under the BRS conventions. My name is Juliette Voinov-Kohler, and I'll be joined by two of my colleagues, Marilyn Bo and Ivani Wang, to present to you the outcomes of the three compliance committees. So we'll start with the Stockholm Convention Compliance Committee. It met from the 16th to the 19th of June. We had participation of all elected members, which is 12 members, apologies. We had no members from the EE region due to the lack of decision taken at the 2025 COPs regarding elections from parties or members from that region. The chair is Ms. Jimena Nieto, the vice chair Mark Govoni, and the rapporteur Jennifer Kutezakwe. We had 7 observers in attendance from 4 parties, 2 Stockholm regional centers, and 1 NGO. The meeting had an agenda which was tailored on the work program of the committee for 26-27 with two main tracks of work. The first track, which is the specific submissions or questions regarding individual parties' compliance, and the committee was to give priority to this track of work. There were no specific submissions, and the committee focused on possible questions of compliance with relation to the designation of country contacts based on its mandate to review national reports and NIPs to identify possible questions of compliance. On the second track of work, which is the systemic issues of general compliance of interest to all parties, the work program of the committee extends to country contacts, national reports, NIPs, legislation, elimination, restriction of POPs, technical assistance, and financial resources. The committee undertook its work on the basis of some documents, including responses received by 85 parties and 18 entities to questionnaires developed by the committee, and that these questionnaires were developed in follow-up to the first meeting of the committee, which took place in November 2025. The aim of these questionnaires was to collect information on the status of implementation, on the challenges faced by parties, and on the activities undertaken by entities in support of parties. The committee also had on its agenda the cooperation with the Basel Convention Implementation and Compliance Committee and the Rotterdam Convention Compliance Committee, and this was illustrated through a joint session with the two other committees, and my colleague Yvonne will come back to that later in the presentation. So turning back to what actually happened during the meeting, so regarding the first track of work on submissions and questions, the committee considered questions of compliance pertaining to one party in relation to the designation of country contacts, and it also identified questions of compliance pertaining to 21 other parties in relation to the either lack of designation of a national focal point, and this concerned 17 parties, or the lack of designation of an official contact point, and this is the case for 4 parties. The committee is well aware that although the designation of a national focal point is embedded in the text of the convention, the designation of an official contact point derives from an invitation by the Conference of the Parties. As requested by the committee, the Secretariat has sent follow-up letters or not verbals to 21 parties on the 6th of July with an invitation to designate country contacts by the 20th of July. The committee will resume consideration of the questions of compliance at its third meeting, which will take place online between the 5th and the 9th of October 2026. And relevant parties will be invited to attend the meeting no later than 60 days prior to the meeting. And by relevant parties, it would be those parties among the 21 parties plus the additional party that will have not designated their country contacts by this deadline of 60 days prior to the meeting. Turning to the second track of the work of the Committee on Systemic Issues and starting with the country contacts, the mandate of the committee is to improve the designation of country contacts, so both NFP and OCP, and the lead member in the committee is Kima Gardiner. The committee considered a report on parties' designation of an NFP and OCP set out in document Inf 4. It reviewed the status of implementation, the challenges faced by parties, and the support provided by entities to parties. The committee agreed to conclusions, and I'll just highlight a few. For example, the committee concluded that national focal points and official contact points are essential nodes for communicating between the Secretariat and the parties, as well as exchange of information between parties. The challenges faced by parties, by a limited number of parties, are a combination of institutional and awareness issues. The support provided for the designation of the provision of updates to country contacts is primarily provided by the Secretariat, the regional centers, and UNEP. In addition to conclusions, the committee agreed to recommendations directed to COP13, and it also agreed to continue the activities of its current program of work under its next program of work. Looking at the intersessional period between now and the third meeting of the committee requested the Secretariat to inform the Stockholm Convention Committee at its third meeting on the outcome of the consideration by the Basel Convention Implementation and Compliance Committee of the web-based tool for updating designated contacts under the Basel Convention. Turning to national reporting, the mandate of the committee is to improve the transmission of national reports, and we have two committee members that took the lead, Mark Govoni and Wei Yao. The committee considered a report on the timeliness and completeness of national reporting under the convention. This report was set out in document Inf 5. Here again, because the committee applied the same methodology throughout its work program, the committee reviewed the status of implementation, the challenges faced by parties, and the support provided by entities to parties. It agreed to some conclusions, and I'll just highlight a few. The committee noted that only 34 of the 186 parties have submitted all required national reports. 41 parties have not transmitted any national reports, and an additional 29 parties have not transmitted their fourth or fifth national reports. Overall, the completeness of the responses to the first level questions of the reporting questionnaire is good, and the preliminary review of completeness for the fifth national report found that 3 questions only were incomplete. A majority of the parties have indicated that they face challenges with the transmission of national reports, and the top challenges identified were the collection of statistical data, followed by obtaining data from relevant sectors. In addition to conclusions, the committee agreed to recommendations to COP13 and to continue its activities aimed at improving national reporting under its next work program. The committee also agreed to some intersessional work in advance of its third meeting. So at its third meeting, it will consider options on how to improve support for parties. It will consider possible improvements to the reporting format and associated guidance, in particular regarding data collection and inventories. It will consider a methodology for reviewing the completeness of national reports, as this is currently lacking. And it will also consider whether to recommend to COP13 that the deadline for the transmission of the 7th national report be advanced to the 28th February 2030. This is to take into account the fact that the information in the national reports supports the work of a variety of subsidiary bodies under the convention, and that a transmission date of the end of August delays the work of those bodies. Turning to national implementation plans. If I may have the next slide, thank you. The mandate of the committee is to improve the transmission of national implementation plans, or NIPs. The committee member that took the lead on this activity is Obed Baloyi. The committee considered a report on the timeliness and completeness of NIPs under Article 7, set out in document 6. Here again, it reviewed the status of implementation, the challenges faced by parties, and the support provided to parties, and it agreed to conclusions, recommendations, and activities for its next work program. Among the conclusions, if I may highlight, based on a preliminary analysis, 14 parties appear to have transmitted all due NIPs. 10 parties appear to not have transmitted their initial NIP, and 48 parties appear to not have transmitted any updates to their initial NIP. Most of the parties that answered the questionnaire indicated they faced challenges in preparing, updating, or transmitting their NIP. Looking ahead and in preparation for the third meeting, the Secretariat was asked to prepare proposals on how to address the challenges faced by parties with the development, reviewing, updating, and transmission of NIPs, and the committee will consider the possible integration of actions to address parties' implementation needs under the Stockholm Convention into their United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. Next, turning to national legislation, the mandate of the committee is to improve the development and strengthening of legislation and or other measures to implement the convention in accordance with Articles 3, 5, and 6 of the convention, and committee member Helga Schrott took the lead on this activity. The committee considered a report on parties' implementation and or of legislation and or measures to implement those provisions. It was set out in document Inf 7. Once again, reviewed the status of implementation, challenges faced, support provided. It agreed to conclusions and recommendations to COP13 and to continuing its activities, however, with some adjustments to the work program as currently drafted. In terms of conclusions, if I may just highlight a few, the information that was reviewed suggests that a significant number of parties are yet to adopt the legal and administrative measures required to control POPs pursuant to Article 3 of the Convention, and a majority of the parties responded that they experienced challenges with developing or updating legislation or other measures. With regards to Article 5, elimination or reduction of releases from unintentional production, 80% of the parties have indicated they have developed an action plan or where appropriate a regional or sub-regional plan. 71% of the parties that responded to the questionnaire have promoted measures to reduce such releases sources and have promoted or required alternative materials or processes, including the adoption of best available techniques and best environmental practices. The most frequently reported challenge include limited availability or quality of national data, limited capacity for assessing releases from unintentional production, and difficulties in updating data from relevant sectors. With regards to Article 6, most of the parties that responded to the questionnaire or transmitted their fifth national report have taken measures to reduce or eliminate releases from stockpiles and waste. Here again, a majority of the parties that responded to the committee questionnaire indicated that they experienced challenges, and the most frequently reported challenge include limited capacity for identifying stockpiles, for managing wastes, for identifying sites contaminated with the listed COPs, and limited capacity for undertaking remediation. The committee decided to continue consideration of this item at its third meeting. It will look at possible revisions to the checklist for the legislator, which is a tool currently attached to the guide on the implementation of the Stockholm Convention. This guide was brought to the attention of the Conference of the Parties, but was not reviewed yet by the parties or by a subsidiary body, and the committee decided to prioritize possible revisions to the checklist for the legislator. The committee will also consider possible revisions to questions 6 and 7 of the reporting format on regulatory and assessment schemes for new pesticides or industrial chemicals. Turning now to the elimination or restriction of POPs, the mandate of the committee is to improve parties' implementation of Article 3, and 2 members of the committee took the lead, Leo Anderson and Hassan Azar. The committee considered a report on parties' elimination or restriction of POPs under Article 3, set out in document Inf 10. Once again, reviewed the status of implementation, the challenges faced by parties, and the support provided to parties, and agreed to conclusions, recommendations, and activities of its next work program. Just to highlight a few conclusions, overall, it appears that many of the parties that either answered the questionnaire or transmitted their 5th national reports have yet to prohibit and or take the legal and administrative measures to eliminate or restrict pollutants in accordance with Article 3, Paragraph 1 of the Convention. The highest rate of adoption of measures is for 2 pesticide POPs listed at the time of the adoption of the Convention, chlordane and dieldrin, while the lowest rate is for 3 industrial POPs listed at the 7th, 8th, and 9th meeting of the COPs, respectively PCNs, CCPs, and P4. The committee decided to continue consideration of this item at its 3rd meeting. It will consider possible revisions to question 5 of the reporting format on measures to reduce or eliminate releases from intentional production and use, so as to improve the transmission by parties of coherent and comprehensive information. Next is technical assistance and financial resources. The mandate of the committee is to improve the implementation of Articles 12 and 13, and the member who took the lead on these activities are Mr. Francisco Nelson Lin Harris de Almeida Jr. The committee considered a report on parties' implementation of Articles 12 and 13 set out in document Inf 11, again reviewed status of implementation, challenges, supports, and agreed to some conclusions, recommendations to COP13, and the continuation of its activities with some adjustments. With regards to sharing with you a few of the conclusions, when it comes to technical assistance, based on the information provided in the questionnaire, so the committee questionnaire and the 5th national reports, 22 parties have reported providing technical assistance to developing country parties and parties with economies in transition through a variety of channels. With regards to the difficulties faced by parties, 50% of the parties that responded to the questionnaire said they encountered challenges in implementing their obligations under Article 12, with the most frequently identified challenges being insufficient financial resources to provide technical assistance and limited institutional or technical capacity to initiate or sustain cooperation towards the provision of technical assistance. With regards to Article 13 on financial resources, 55 parties of the combined set of 123 parties that basically engaged with the committee, either through response to questionnaire or the 5th national reports, indicated they provided financial resources or incentives for national activities intended to implement the convention pursuant to Article 13, Paragraph 1. A total of 29 parties contributed to the 8th replenishment of the GEF, and a total of 16 parties have indicated that, as a developed country party, they have provided new and additional resources to the Convention's financial mechanism under the Convention. From the information reviewed, there appears to be different understandings among the parties of the type of information to be reported in answer to questions 31 to 35 of the reporting format. and the Secretariat and a limited number of entities provide support for parties' implementations of Article 12 and 13. At its third meeting, the committee will consider options in the reporting format to improve data collection and compilation on the implementation of Articles 12 and 13, and it will consider possible adjustments to the reporting format so as to facilitate transmission of comparable data on parties' implementation of Articles 12 and 13. On other matters, the Stockholm Compliance Committee noted the interlinkages between its work and the work of the Effectiveness Evaluation Committee. It requested the Secretariat to present the effectiveness evaluation process and to map the interlinkages between the program of work of the committee and the mandate of the Effectiveness Evaluation Committee for consideration at its third meeting, along with any recommendation the committee may wish to bring to the attention of the COP. Looking ahead, as I mentioned, the committee will meet for its third meeting online between 5 and 9 of October. It will consider outstanding issues of its work program, including any follow-up activities as decided by the committee at its second meeting. It will finalize its draft work program for the next biennium for consultation with parties ahead of the COP. So the draft work program will be circulated with an invitation for comments. The committee will also organize dialogues between representatives of entities with a mandate to support parties with the implementation of the convention. So the 17 regional centers, the GEF Secretariat, the GEF agencies, and other entities. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the donors, Canada, Kingdom of the Netherlands, and the European Union, which contributed to the work of the committee. And with this, I will hand over to my colleague Marilyn to present to you the outcomes of the work of the 17th meeting of the ICC. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you very much, Juliette. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So my name is Marilyn Beau, and I'm the colleague in the Secretariat that service the work of the Basel Convention Implementation and Compliance Committee. And this is my pleasure today to present the outcome of its 17th meeting. So the 17th meeting of the Implementation and Compliance Committee took place in Geneva from the 18th to the 21st of June. 13 members of the committee participated in person in the meeting. The meeting was also attended by 5 observers. The chair of the committee is Ms. Sophie Bernier. There are also 3 vice chairs, Mr. Hassan Aznar, Catherine Carr, Michel Govander, and 1 rapporteur, Ms. Nieka Nicolas. So the agenda of the 17th meeting of the committee was formed by all of the objectives of the work program of the committee for 2026-2027. So this work program contains 7 different objectives that we will then go through in a moment. The work on the 7 objectives of the work program was informed by responses to questionnaires that were sent to parties, to Basel Convention regional centers, and to other entities, as well as data generated from the national reports. So this was for the general issue of implementation and compliance. The committee also considered specific submissions. It currently has 22 specific submissions in front of it. Due to the large number of specific submissions, not all of them could be considered at the June meeting. So only half of them, 11 specific submissions, could be considered in June, as listed on the screen. And the remaining 11 specific submissions will be considered at a resume session in October. So the lead members with regard to specific submissions are Ms. Angela Rivera and Ms. Sonja Dunvold. So we would like to express our appreciation for their leadership on the specific submissions track. So the 11 specific submissions that were considered in June relate to 9 Secretariat submissions with regard to difficulties with national reporting obligations and 2 self-party submissions pertaining to difficulties with the development of legal frameworks. So we move on to the next slide. So we will, with this next slide, present the outcome of the work of the committee with regard to general issues of implementation and compliance. So the first area of work is the work on national reporting. So how to improve implementation of and compliance with national reporting obligations under Article 13, paragraph 3. So for this work, we had 2 lead members, Irina Talamoni and Mohamed Aman. So a number of activities and reports were undertaken during the intersessional period and were considered at the meeting. The first of them is the draft classifications of compliance performance with national reporting for 2022 and 2023. So this draft classification of compliance performance is done through a methodology that was approved by COP13 and against targets that were approved by COP17. So the results of this draft classification is as follows. So for the transmission rate against the target of 70%, we reached the target for the year 2022 with 70% of reports that were due that were transmitted for that year. And for the year 2023, 68% of reports due were transmitted, so very close as well to the 70% target. Now, turning to the second target, which is target of 25%, meaning 25% of reports were transmitted complete and on time. So for those 2 years as well, we are very close to reaching this target. For 2022, we achieved 22%, and 2023, the percentage of 24% was achieved. With regard to the third target, so it's the target of 50%. 50% of reports due have been transmitted complete, whether on time or late. So for this target, it's a bit lower, let's say, the results that were received for the year 23-22, as only 38% of national reports were transmitted completed for both years. So this draft classification is actually subject to some intersessional work. As you can see, there is a little asterisk in green, meaning that after the ICC meeting, the ICC invited parties that were subject to this draft classification to review the results of this classification and provide any feedback they would want to provide regarding the completeness of their reports for those 2 years, or whether also they would want to transmit reports for those 2 years in case reports were not transmitted. So a letter was sent on the 1st of July to relevant parties to seek feedback on these draft classifications. It will be with the deadline of 31st of July, and the draft classifications will be revised and further considered by the committee at its resume session in October. The second second work stream that was undertaken by the committee is the work on cooperation framework. So we heard about it already in the context of the Stockholm Convention Compliance Committee, but the work and linkages between national reporting obligations, national reporting needs, and the possible instrument that the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Frameworks provide for addressing those needs was further studied and looked at during the committee's meeting in June through the report that was prepared and looked at the extent of which parties' implementation needs are mainstream into cooperation framework. So this report is comprehensive. It really looked at all the cooperation frameworks developed to date by parties to the convention, as well as country common analysis also, which is the prerequisite analysis, let's say diagnosis and serve as a basis for the development of the cooperation framework. So this report was informative and supported the committee in further developing recommendations to COP as to how the cooperation frameworks could be used by parties to the convention in addressing their national reporting needs. The third activity under the national reporting area was the report on activities of entities that aim at assisting parties in transmitting their national reports. So this report was prepared based on questionnaires that were sent to BCRCs and other entities, asking them a number of questions about how much assistance they provided to parties, and also possible challenges that they faced when providing this assistance, or challenges that they saw that parties were facing in transmitting national reports. This year, something new was done through this report, as the progress made by those parties that received assistance was also assessed. So based on those three reports, through three outputs, the committee developed recommendations to COP18. However, because the draft classifications are being revised, the draft conclusions and recommendations on the classifications will be further refined at the resume session. However, having seen that targets, some of the targets are being more regularly met, in particular the 70% target, because it's being met now for 2022, but it was also met for 2020 in the last biennium. The committee decided to raise a little bit the ambition with the transmission of national reports, and recommended to COP to revise targets of 25 and 70 by increasing them to the amounts that you can see on the slide. Regarding cooperation frameworks, here as well, the committee wishes to put forward more recommendations regarding how to further mainstream national reporting needs in cooperation frameworks, and developed a number of recommendations that go in that direction for the consideration of the COP. With regard to its next work program, so the committee is proposing to continue activities, so a continuation of activities, except for the review of additional measures other than the paragraph 20A and 20B of its terms of reference. And instead of continuing to review possible additional measures, to measures that are taken once the facilitation procedure is done, instead of continuing to review possible additional measures, the committee requested the Secretariat to raise parties' awareness on the additional measures that were adopted by the last COP, which is, as you would remember, it's a new paragraph 20C in its terms of reference, that propose additional measures once the facilitation procedure is done, in case where parties have not submitted a national report for 5 or more years since the report for 2018 was due. So we can now turn to another important area of the committee's work, which is on illegal traffic. We'd like to recognize the support and the work of the lead member here, Irina Talamoni. So under this area, a number of reports were prepared. The first one being the scoping report on the extent of illegal traffic. The specific year of 2023 was considered. And in order to prepare this scoping report, data from Table 9 for the year 2023 was used. So this scoping report provides information on the number of cases of illegal traffic in that year, the most trafficked waste streams subject to those cases of illegal traffic, the regions where the cases of illegal traffic occurred, and also how the cases were resolved. So it's a very comprehensive report that is being prepared by the committee. It's been there for a number of work programs. In the present report, it's also interesting to see the trends. The committee was able to look at trends since 2018. So you see a little bit of the dynamics with the number of cases of illegal traffic being reported under the convention. In addition to this scoping report, the committee also prepared a template to establish national coordination mechanisms between competent authorities and enforcement authorities at the national level, as well as to establish effective communication channels. This work is still ongoing and is currently being commented by enforced members and observers, and will be revised for further consideration by committee at its resume session. The committee also conducted a classification of parties' compliance performance in relation to obligations under Article 9, so the article on preventing and punishing illegal traffic. So this classification, which is also a very important piece of the puzzle to see how the countries are implementing or legislatively implementing the obligations under Article 9 at the national level, is also subject to intersessional work. So a letter was sent to all parties that were part of this classification to seek their feedback on the results of the classification. Additionally, there was also a report on activities of BCRCs and other entities that provide support to parties under Article 9. And also the committee reviewed the activities of Inforce. So based on this reports, this analysis, then the committee agreed on conclusions and also some recommendations to COP18, in particular regarding or based on the scoping report, the committee recommended to COP18 to encourage parties to pay special attention to the most trafficked waste streams under the convention, which are three: the end-of-life vehicle, the plastic waste, and the indie waste. So, and with regard to the coordination mechanism template, so the committee recommends to the COP to welcome it and to request Secretariat as well as other entities to make use of it when implementing obligations under Article 9. For the next work program of the committee, it is suggested to continue current activities. Turning now to the national legislation. So here, the committee has considered a report on the self-review by 72 parties of their legislation. So how the parties are self-reviewing their legislation towards meeting the obligations of the convention. So also there are very interesting results as to what's the level of legislative implementation of the convention in parties. This work of the self-review of legislation was completed or supplemented by a form for parties to assess the legislative implementation of the amendments under the convention. So the ban amendment for those that are banned, but also the plastic waste amendment and also the e-waste amendment, as well as the liability protocol, even though it is yet to enter into force. Under national legislation, there was also a report on the parties that have yet to develop legislation implementing the convention, to understand what are the challenges there, the type of support that is needed from those parties. And then also the report on activities of entities that also are related to national legislation. So a number of recommendations will go forward to COP. And with regard to the next work program of the committee suggested to continue the current activities, however, with some adjustments, for example, to extend the self-review to the amended Annex 4 that was just adopted at COP17. And also the committee is interested also to update the checklist for the legislator to bring it up to date. So we turn to the fourth area of the committee's work program, which is on broader efforts to improve implementation of the convention. So it's an area of work which is called generally improved implementation of and compliance with the convention. So the lead members for this area of work was Irina Talamoni and Samira Aldozari. Thank you very much to them. So under this area of work, there were basically two tracks. The first one is on the updating and review of guidance under the convention. And the second one was dedicated to a report on options to access financial support for the implementation of the convention. So the first track on guidance, so here basically two folds as well. The first one is the committee was interested to update the guide to the control system and the manual for the implementation of the convention based on feedback received by parties and observers during the intersessional period, as well as relevant COP17 decisions. So that's the first part. The second part was looking at possible updates that were needed to other guidance manual that were developed by the committee over the years. So here we are looking at seven other guidance documents, and the committee identify areas, possible updates that those guidance could benefit from. So that's the work that happened. And based on this work, the committee provided recommendations to COP. But first of all, because the two updated guidance manual and the guide to the control system will normally be going for possible adoption by COP. But before that, the committee invited a round of comments by parties and observers on those updated versions, so that it will consider updated versions of those guidance at the resume session, so that it can go forward to COP consideration. Regarding the notes on options available to access financial support, so the document has been reviewed, and it is recommended to COP that it welcomes it, as well as encourage parties and other entities to make use of it in their efforts to access financial support for the implementation of the convention. For the next work program of the committee, so the idea would be for the committee to continue to review the guide and manual with any possible future submissions in response to decision BC 17/2, and to initiate the review and update of the 7 other guidance manual. So now we turn to the area of work of the committee on the PIC procedure. So we'd like to thank the lead members in this area, which were Irina Talamoni and Samira Aldozari. So this, the mandate of the committee in this area was to monitor the implementation of activities that were agreed in decision BC 17/2. So here we are looking at the parts 1 to 7 of the decision, not part 8, obviously, because this is entrusted to the small intersessional working group on the PIC. But in those parts 1 to 7 of decision BC 17/2, there are a number of requests to Secretariat to undertake activities, or a number of requests or calls for information to be provided by parties or observers. So the committee focused its monitoring on those types of activities. So based on the report, monitoring the activities implemented, the committee formulated 11 recommendations to COP18. Just to give you a few examples here, for example, on the area on exchange of information with and between competent authorities, the committee basically forwarded the desk study that was prepared by Secretariat on the feasibility of a web-based tool for updating country contacts. It also recommended to COP 18 to consider amending the reporting format to include a new optional sub-question for B, to invite parties to provide optionally information on what type of format they accept for their notification and movement documents. On transit, here the committee proposed a formulation for the new sub-question 3H3, which was adopted by the last COP, and also requested that instructions for completing this new sub-question would be forwarded to COP 18 for consideration. We move on. Okay. So the next, I was not finished, but this is okay because I think we have to move on. So we can go maybe to country contacts. Country contacts. So it's also an area that the committee monitors very closely. And so based on the report prepared by Secretariat, the committee could be informed that we have almost a 100% compliance rate with designation of competent authorities and focal points, except for one party that has yet to nominate a competent authority. The committee was also informed of possible challenges that some parties may have with having functional email addresses. So this was all considered by the committee, which formulated a number of conclusions and recommendations in this area. For the next work program, the committee decided to continue with current activities. And as with other compliance committees, the BC Compliance Committee also had an area on enhancing cooperation with the two other committees. So we will hear more about it later. There was this joint session on the 19th of June. And based on this, the committee decided to continue to enhance cooperation with the two other compliance committees in order to facilitate and improve compliance through exchange of views and information on activities and operations of joint interest. So this also concluded the review of the general review mandates of the committee. Now we reached my last slide, which is the slide about the work that will continue intersessionally. So as I said before, there are a number of documents, reports that are being consulted with parties and observers. So the deadline is 31st of July. First of all, the two classifications, so the classification on national reporting obligation and the classification on Article 9 obligations are currently being consulted with relevant parties for feedback by the end of July. Those will be then revised for further consideration at the resume session of the committee. And as mentioned before, also the updated draft of the guide to the control system and of the manual are also being circulated for feedback by parties and observers. The committee will have two resume sessions. The first one will be from the 12th to the 16th of October online. During that resume session, the committee will look at the 11 specific submissions that it could not yet consider, and possibly others. And it will also resume consideration of incomplete agenda items, such as classification of national reporting, of Article 9, the coordination mechanism template, and the updated versions of the two guidance documents mentioned before, and will also finalize its work program for the next biennium. The second resume session, which will be next year, 22nd to 26th of February, will be solely dedicated to specific submissions. Yes, and also it's important to note, like for other committees, the program of work for the next biennium will be consulted with parties ahead of the COP 18. And with that, I would like to thank very much the donors. So European Union for the financial support it provided to the general review mandate of the committee, and the European Union, Japan, Norway, and Switzerland for the financial support that they provided to the specific submissions. So this concludes the outcome of the presentation on the outcome of the Basel Convention ICC meeting. And now I will hand over to my colleague Yvonne to present to us the outcome of the Rotterdam Convention Compliance Committee meeting. Thank you. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Marie-Hélène, and thank you all for taking the time this afternoon or this morning or evening. The last of the three committees to have met in June was the Rotterdam Convention Compliance Committee. It was holding its fourth meeting on the 19th until the 21st of June. There were 12 members who were present. Currently, the chair is Carolina Antonin, and she is accompanied by her vice chair, Helges Samuel Bandeira, and the rapporteur is Hamad Joda. There were also three observers present from representatives of parties, as well as Basel and Stockholm Conventions regional centres. The agenda included consideration of the matters of specific submissions, which, according to the current programme of work, are to be accorded priority. But it also included consideration of a number of different systemic issues of general compliance of interest to all parties. And we'll look in a little bit more detail at those in just a minute. And those also included the issue of cooperation with the other two compliance committees. The work of the Rotterdam Committee was informed by responses that parties had provided to a number of questions related to aspects of implementation of the convention. The questions were circulated in January with a deadline for submission at the end of March this year. Turning first of all to the specific submissions, which are based on paragraphs 12 and 13 of Annex 7 to the Convention. There was a note from the Secretariat that was prepared just to highlight that there were not actually specific submissions that were considered at this current meeting. The committee has previously successfully resolved a matter of concern about one party in relation to its designated national authority. At this meeting, based on the information from parties that was presented in the Secretariat's note and that was transmitted by parties, the committee noted that there was one party out of the 168 to the convention that has yet to notify its designated national authority and has requested the Secretariat to notify that party of the matter of concern. The Secretariat was also requested to communicate with 9 parties who have yet to provide any input responses in relation to any of the chemicals that are listed in Annex 3 to the Convention, and then to take that and compile the further information and report to the 5th meeting. And just to highlight that in the event of when related to the import responses, the request does not lead to the initiation of a procedure under paragraph 13 of Annex 7, but rather collecting more information, and this will then be considered at the next meeting. There are 2 templates for specific submissions that have been made available on the convention website. The committee was informed that these are available but have yet to be used, although that may be a question of time because they are relatively new. And so the committee requested that the Secretariat identify possible elements for review based on parties' experiences and to continue to raise awareness of those templates so that parties know that they are there should they wish to use them. In the second train of work that was undertaken by the committee relating to the review of systemic issues of general compliance, the first matter that was looked at was the activity related to laws, regulations, policies, procedures, and other measures to implement the convention. We are grateful for the lead members, Trond Luskaug and Rodrigo González Videla, who guided this work. There was a note prepared for consideration of the meeting, as well as an updated analysis of these laws, regulations, etc. After considering that information, the committee decided to make a number of recommendations to the COP13, which will meet in 2027, and to recommend that it consider deciding to firstly remind parties of what resources are available to assist them, and of the importance of transmitting their texts of national legislation to the Secretariat, noting that these texts are then made available on the convention website. Also, to encourage parties to share information on best practices and good examples, including when it comes to coordination, and to invite parties to engage in cooperation. To highlight that there were a number of different cross-cutting challenges that were identified by parties in their responses to the questions that were circulated on behalf of the committee. A couple of those cross-cutting challenges related to coordination and cooperation, as well as communication between the different stakeholders who were involved. And so the committee tried to adopt an holistic approach and try to address this wherever it was identified across the board. The recommendations also to COP include to encourage parties to increase awareness of the convention's obligations at the national level, to request the committee to review what guidance materials are available when it comes to developing and updating legislative and administrative measures. So that would lead to additional work in the next biennium for the committee to see if those guidance materials are still up to date, if they need some additional work, some reviews, some updating, whether there are other materials that may be necessary. And there was also a recommendation that COP request the Secretariat to undertake activities to support parties who wish to make the texts of their national legislation available, and in developing national legal frameworks. When it comes to notifications of final regulatory action, there were lead members Carmen Krajanc and Joseph Cantamanto Edmund who took the lead. There was a note also prepared for the meeting on this topic. And the committee took note that in its previous meeting, the second meeting, there was a recommendation that then went forward to the COP and that is currently being implemented in terms of to address the challenges that have been identified. There was a need for technical assistance, and that is included in the technical assistance plan for 4 years that is currently in motion. Strengthening those previous recommendations, the committee on this occasion recommended to the COP to consider deciding to encourage partners, so that would include UNEP, FAO, and others, to continue their efforts to assist parties in actions to prepare and adopt final regulatory actions and to submit those to the Secretariat. And then there was also a recommendation to request the Secretariat to continue to collect information on this matter, in particular from parties who had not yet provided any information to the committee. The committee was conscious that there is a lot of information and was very grateful for the information that has already been provided by a number of different parties from all of the PIC regions, but certainly would be grateful to receive yet more information, and in particular to get information from those regions or parties where there might be gaps. Turning to the next activity on its work program, which was relating to exports and imports of Annex 3 chemicals. Here we had Carmen Craginch and Rodrigo González Videla taking the lead. There was a note by the Secretariat prepared with quite a lot of statistical information based on the questions that were circulated to parties, but also information that had been transmitted by parties in their import responses and their notifications of final regulatory action. There was also a compilation of examples of communication channels and mechanisms for coordination that was made available in this document Inf2, which led to the committee taking a number of actions for intersessional activities, but also recommendations to COP13. So there was a request to the Secretariat to continue to compile this information, in particular when it comes to the communication channels and coordination, bearing in mind that that was a cross-cutting challenge that was identified. There was also a request to continue to raise awareness to help improve understanding when it comes to the obligations of the convention in that respect. The recommendation to the next meeting of the COP is to invite parties to establish and strengthen those channels for information exchange and mechanisms for coordination. And for those parties who already have those mechanisms in place, to share those examples so that there is some kind of an example or some information, concrete information to those who might not yet have these channels and mechanisms established. In terms of export notifications, here we also had Carmen Craginch taking the lead. The committee members noted that there was potentially a challenge being faced with not all parties having complete or up-to-date contact information, and so recommended that the COP remind parties of the importance of the transmission of complete updated contact information, encourage parties who may be facing communication challenges to inform the Secretariat, and then the Secretariat to also be requested to continue that follow-up so that there is always complete and updated contact information that is available on the convention website. There was also an activity that was mandated for the committee in relation to information submission, so looking at how the implementation and information needs under the Rotterdam Convention were integrated into sustainable development cooperation frameworks. You may recall from the information you just heard that the other two committees, or the other committee in particular, Basel, did look at this as well, and it was one of the items that was considered and on which exchange took place during the joint session, which we'll look at in just a minute. There were recommendations made to COP13 to encourage parties to communicate with entities responsible for development of their sustainable development cooperation frameworks, resident coordinators, and country teams, and to increase involvement of the stakeholders from the Rotterdam side in the sustainable development cooperation framework processes. The UN country teams were to be invited to include parties' implementation needs under the Rotterdam Convention in the common country analysis. You may recall just a few minutes ago, Marie-Hélène was saying that is the basis for the development of the framework. The recommendations also include an encouragement to parties facing information submission challenges to include actions to address their needs in the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. So again, reinforcing this interlinkage and integration between the two worlds. And then encouraging information sharing on what could be best practices and supporting country level efforts towards integration. So in terms of looking ahead, I beg your pardon. I'll see if we can just go back. in terms of looking ahead, so the committee has agreed on a draft program of work for the biennium 2028-2029. There are to be consultations with parties on that draft, so please watch this space, and the committee will certainly be very grateful for comments from parties ahead of COP13, and that will feed into the discussions at that meeting in 2027. I beg your pardon, that went forwards. The draft program of work and the comments will be presented to the COP in 2027. There will be a report which will include the recommendations to COP13 in 2027. And within that, the committee members wish to stress the importance of having at least one physical meeting during the course of the biennium. Before turning to a brief overview of the joint session, just to thank Switzerland and the European Union for funding the activities of the Rotterdam Convention Compliance Committee. So in terms of the joint session, that took place on the 19th of June, which was the last day for the Stockholm Convention meeting, the middle of the Basel Convention meeting, and the first day of the Rotterdam Convention meeting, so an overlap between the three. It was quite groundbreaking. It's the first time that these three bodies have met all together, and takes into account that each of them has a mandate to cooperate with one another. It's building on cooperation that already existed between Basel and Rotterdam, and initiating cooperation with the Stockholm Compliance Committee, bearing in mind the different levels of development of each of the committees. Apologies for that. So there was, during the session, an exchange of views and information between the committees on activities, operations, and processes of joint interest. Those were identified by the chairs, who consulted with one another ahead of the meetings, and also had some information sharing with the members to make sure that all were on the same page before we had this exchange. There were two areas of joint interest that were identified: transmission of information to the Secretariat, looking at national reporting under Basel and Stockholm, and the equivalent, which was understood to be import responses under the Rotterdam Convention, because there is no reporting under the Rotterdam Convention. And then also looking at this issue of integration of implementation needs into the Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. There was a chance for presentations on the activities and their experiences, followed by questions and answers for each of the topics by each of the committees. And there have been lessons that have been taken back and that are being taken back and digested, looking at how to take that exchange on board in terms of the work that the committees do to support implementations of the conventions and success stories, and thereby enrich their work and strengthen cooperation between them. There was also a joint lunch for members that was generously funded by the government of Switzerland. With that, we will say thank you, and I will pass you back to Juliette for a few questions before we close. Thank you.